Just trying to get our, keep this going, Hubert.
We don't have a license for a TV station.
And thank God for YouTube. Oh, gosh. Okay. Wow, 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 wow. Okay. All right. There we are, there we are, there we are.
It's not time.
Not time, okay. All right.
Can you check the judge's volume, because he doesn't have a lot of voice. He's not a screamer. I already turned him up.
Oh, you turned it up?
I turned him up, but I want to see if I can
Oh,
hear him.
yes, yes.
I can make it whatever level you want me to.
Yeah, that's the way I thought.
All right, yes, yes, yes. Anyway, welcome to Truth, the radio program designed with you in mind, a program whose sole purpose is to empower you, our listeners, for information leads to knowledge, and knowledge is, you got it, power. And as always, I want to empower you to take control of your life, those things that impact you, your family, and your community. As always, too. Once you go to the website at www.gwen-truth.com, so you can access all the resource listings that are there. You can link to links that are available for your municipalities, your county agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, and advocacy groups. As always, too, I want you to go there so you can take part in the query that we have. And that query is asking you about the positive turning of the economy and whether or not it has positively impacted you personally. I want to hear from you. You know, there are people who say, yeah, things are looking up and they're doing better, but I haven't seen it yet or I haven't experienced it yet. I want to know, how is that positive turn of the economy, how is it impacting you? So go to the website at www.gwen-truth.com. Okay, as has been stated, I'm Gwen Azama-Edwards, former city commissioner, retired city clerk, city of Daytona Beach. Written a book. I'm in the process of writing another book. Minister, community volunteer. I love that. Community volunteer. I've been doing that for over 40 years and I enjoy it so much. Working with our elder community, working with children, families, and the like. I truly enjoy that. And I was just talking with our guest, the circuit judge of Volusia County, Judge Hubert L. Grimes. And he's my guest for this evening, and we're going to talk about some things, and we're going to talk especially about his book, which is entitled, How to Keep Your Child from Going to Jail. I'll show that to you. How to keep your child from going to jail. And some tried and true things that should be going on in your household, whether you're a single parent, mom and dad are both there, grandparent raising the child, you know, a significant other or a surrogate or whatever. There are things that should be going on in the household, things that really can help. And I've got to tell you that it's one of the best books that I have read, especially when it comes to the young people, your young people and our young people overall, and we should all be concerned about our young people. And as was stated here, that this book is a difference maker, and I believe that wholeheartedly. The Honorable Hubert L. Grimes. Welcome, Hubert.
Thank you, Gwen. It's my pleasure to be here with you, sir.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, you're going to have to use that deep voice that I know you got there, okay?
No problem.
Okay.
No problem.
All right, all right, all right. Now, as we begin to get started, it's working. As we begin to get started, I want to, as Hubert and I'm Judge, can I call you Hubert?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're friends. We've known each other buku years, buku years. I'm proud to say that I was one of the ones that encouraged him initially to run. Oh, praise God. Best encouragement I've done.
Here we are 25 years later.
Yes, yes. Oh, do you feel old?
Of course
We don't feel old. Of course we don't. We are really and truly just doing, and you know, I know you're doing it, I'm doing it. And one of the things I've started to say is that one of the best things that you can give, which is the priciest thing that you can give. You know, you can give money to help in situations, to help people, but the priciest thing you can give is yourself, because time is the same for everybody, and how you use it, you know, is what determines the truest value that you put to it. But that, because it's such a precious thing, Hubert, I believe that when you take time with someone, when you give up your time to someone to help others or whatever, I think that is truly the greatest gift that you can give them, and it speaks volumes about your desire and your concern in regards to that particular person. That's why it's so important for parents to spend valuable time with their young people. You know, we aren't talking about the fact that you're in the same room and they're on their iPhone or whatever and you're on your computer. That's not the kind of valuable time, because you're in the same space, but you're not actually giving each other your time and your attention. And what I love so much about your book is that, number one, it's a lot of common sense stuff. My husband always says that, you know, no matter how far you're going to college and everything else, one of the things you should have is common sense. And, you know, God gives us the gift of wisdom to go with that. So there's a lot of wisdom in this book, a lot of common sense stuff in the book. And as I was saying to you, really and truly, all of that stuff that I was told by my mother, that I told my children, and hopefully they will get to tell their children, and the stuff that the great-grands and the grandmothers and stuff have told us, it's all contained in this one book. And I know that there are also experts and those who've dealt with children either in the classroom or in other settings that also gave you information and some leanings as it relates to the book as well. So there's a lot of again, wisdom, knowledge, and value to this book that I encourage so many to, and everyone really, to get it. And I was just saying to one of the young ladies who was leaving, and I was encouraging her to get it, she said, I don't have any children. I said, but this is what you get to prepare yourself for when you will have them. And even if we don't have children, we have nieces, we have nephews and the like, and other family members who are younger. And we can use what's contained in this to help to guide them the right way. So if you would take a few minutes first to share with our listening audience a little bit about you, what kind of prepared you for some of the experiences that are listed here, because you say that you drew on your upbringing, you drew on your experience, and in particular your experience as a judge. So share that with our listeners if you would.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for inviting me to be a guest here tonight. It's awesome, an opportunity to be able to reach out to our audience and hopefully touch the lives of some people that are out there in the listening land. You know, I'm a native Floridian. I grew up in Polk County down in Bartow. Small town upbringing, family-centered. My mother was very involved in church, was very involved in the community. I tagged along behind her. As a result of that, you know, I got some early experiences in terms of how to deal with people. And of course, along the way, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, some 25 years ago, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of being elected to the bench. And you know, what happened and how this book sort of came about is a result of the work. We were involved with actually a totally unrelated project. And as a result of that project, some statistics were put together, and I was shocked to find out that I had done over 100,000 cases.
Wow.
And as I began to look back at that, I also began to reflect on the fact that we've met some successes in the juvenile delinquency area. I served as a juvenile delinquency judge for 11 years on the west side of the county. And along the way, we would have periodically young people come back and say, thank you. Thank you for being tough on me. Thank you for helping to turn me around. All of those things that really helped me to know that something we were doing was making a difference. Well, as a part of that, I began one day to reflect while sitting on the bench. I said, wow, if we can turn kids around as they come through this courtroom, and statistics nationally say that 80% of the kids that actually come through the juvenile justice system actually go on to lead a positive life. They actually make good, as opposed to becoming people that are throwaways. And I remember thinking, said, if I could help young people, not only those who come in to the courtroom, the four corners of the courtroom, to help turn their lives around. What happened if we could impact those young people before they got to court? And as a result of that, that was the genesis of this book. And I started thinking and reflecting on what are some of those key things, those unique things that seem to run the threads, we say, the common threads that run through these various cases that we've dealt with over the years. And so because I've had a very broad background on the bench, both as a county judge, doing a wide range of cases, criminal, misdemeanors, civil, domestic violence, and then in the family law arena on the circuit side, I began to be able to call upon a wide range of those kinds of matters, delinquency cases, dependency cases where kids have been abused, neglected, or abandoned by their parents. Or on the other hand, kids who are getting into schoolyard fights, kids who are also involved with the drug scene, because that takes up a lot of our kids' positive energy today, dealing with them and trying to help redirect them. So all of that being said, I published this book actually back in 2010, and have gone around, done a number of workshops. We've made it available on our website. We've done efforts to try to help engage parents. And it's really more of a primer for parents, to kind of like say, parents, think about some of the issues that your children are confronted by. And the issues that kids are confronted with today, while the issues themselves may be different, many of the ways of dealing with them are systematic of what have occurred for generations. Like you said earlier, things that our parents taught us, basic thing, respect. That's sometimes uncommon, to respect your parents, to respect adults, to understand how to get along with people, to understand the words like, okay, forgive me, I'm sorry. You would think that those little simple things are sometimes can turn out to be the most powerful weapons that we have in our arsenal of survival.
And respecting yourself.
Absolutely.
And loving yourself. And a lot of what you say in here, I think part of the major portion of it that is so key and is so important is the foundation that's set early on in the child's life. And you say that it's, even though it may be more difficult as they get older to try to then kind of pick up and carry on from that point, it's a lot easier to do it when they're younger, even in terms of infancy. And I can relate so much to one of the things where you talked about these kids, the parents take them into the store and they start screaming their heads off because they want their parent to get them this or to get them that. And in order to soothe them, instead of disciplining that child, the parent will go ahead and get them what it is that they're crying for. And what they've taught them then is that if you want something, this is what you do to get it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I make an analogy of saying, and I think it draws on my experience in the agricultural settings of Polk County, that you can actually take a sapling, such as a young tree, and you can literally bend that sapling any way you want to bend it, and it's going to grow in that direction. But on the other hand, if you wait until that thing grows up and becomes a full-fledged tree, an oak tree if you would, there's nothing you can do with the oak tree except trim it back or cut it down. And so the same thing is true about life. If we start working with our youngsters from the very beginning of their getting here, I'm talking about even with the infants in the crib, because kids even from that point learn how to manipulate parents. Now people will probably say, oh, you must be out of your mind. But no, kids actually know that if they holler, if they scream long enough, that they're going to get some type of results or some type of response from the parents or the caregiver. And so that continues on if it just gets to the point where the parent just wants to stick a bottle in the mouth, so to speak, without maybe soothing the child, without maybe comforting the child. But on the other hand, take that to the next level, as you pointed out, when they end up in a Walmart or a Kmart, and little Johnny decides that he wants some candy, and mom said, no, you're not going to get any candy. But little Johnny said, well, I want some candy. And next thing you know, little Johnny's screaming and doing, and we've all seen them. We've seen kids do temper tantrums, and many times the people on the outside, they're looking at them almost say, I know that parent's going to do something to that kid. I know they should do something to that kid. They should spank his little butt or something to correct them right there on the spot. And oftentimes I've actually heard people say, but you can't spank your child. It's against the law. I've actually had people tell me that in court, that you cannot do that. And that's not true. Chapter 39.00001 of Florida statute says that corporal punishment of a child for disciplinary purposes is permissible, so long as it doesn't result in permanent harm. So you should correct them early on. And if you correct them early on, the need for doing so later on, when they get to be 16, and at those horrible ages when they're
bigger than you,
bigger than the parent themselves, then you're not going to have those same issues because the children will understand the lines of respect.
Now, you speak about something that I was always trying to be careful with my children when I was raising them, and that and telling them too that really people judge you by the company you keep. And there are people who say, well, you're being judgmental, you know, don't put this person down, don't put that person down, but you really are judged by the company you keep. Not only are you judged by that, but your behavior can be shaped by that as well, right?
Absolutely. There's an old adage that says birds of a feather flock together, and that's so true. Young people who hang out with certain types of groups, for example, we always say athletes hang out with athletes, musicians hang out with musicians, artsy kids hang out with artsy kids, kids who are into the academic side or kids who are into the video games. Typically those groups hang together, and they will end up oftentimes picking up similar kinds of traits, responses to certain situations. And while sometimes that can be good, and we hope that that's good because they're getting positive reinforcement, we have to always be mindful of the people they're hanging out with, because on the other hand, they can also pick up bad habits too. And so it's very important that parents understand and know the children that their kids are hanging out with early on, because you want to put them in a positive environment. You want to try to give them sort of parameters so that they don't end up being the ones who become discipline problems. And the problem with the lack of discipline is oftentimes it starts in the home, but then it proceeds beyond the home into the schools. And if the youngster begins to disrespect the parent, the next person they disrespect will be the teacher. The next person after that will be the principal, and then maybe even getting to the point of the school resource officer. Except that when it gets to the school resource officer, they have the authority to arrest you and to take a child into custody. And then when they get in the court system, they realize, wait a minute, hold on. This isn't quite the same thing that it was. I thought this was a game. And I've had kids say, oh, I can do 21 days. I can do this. I can take the detention center. It's no big deal. But then when you sentence them to those facilities, you sentence them to detention center, or they end up going into a program, many times they're shocked by the fact that, oh my God, this is like a wake-up call. Nobody ever told me it was going to be like this. And so before you get to all of that, if the parents can begin to intervene early on and to monitor their children, I'm talking about from the time of their infancy, not just plugging them in a room and letting them watch TV all day.
Right. That being the babysitter, right? Exactly.
And then it grows from being a television set to being video games. And then from video games to the point of now being influenced by the other kids who are doing the same. And
of course, you talk about the gang activity too, how parents need to be watchful of how their kids are dressing, and not just who they're hanging out with, but some of the things that really can be easily identified as gang type of activities.
There are a lot of people that don't want to acknowledge the fact that we have gangs in Volusia County. I'm telling you from firsthand experience, seeing it in the court system, and the sheriff's office provided us with a list of the gangs that they were monitoring in our county, because a lot of the activity, a lot of the criminality starts there. It doesn't start until they become part of the quote-unquote adult gangs. A lot of it happens when they're youth and they're actually engaged in stuff, sometimes committing crimes to quote-unquote to get into the gang, because that's their quote-unquote initiation, or committing crimes to stay in the gang. And these are not just guys, these are also young ladies too. Yeah. And so parents have to be mindful of the kinds of things that the kids start wearing. For example, their gang symbols. It could be handkerchiefs on the one hand, certain colors, certain gang colors that the kids wear, certain types of symbols on their clothes, certain types of things tattoos that the kids are placing upon their bodies. Just even their style of dress. When you start seeing a tremendous, almost 180-degree change in the style of that child's dress, you start seeing a change in that child's attitude, the parents need to kind of peek behind the veil and see what exactly is going on. They need to be involved and find out what's going on with school. Is the child even showing up for school? Because the mere fact that you send them out the door, or that they get on the bus, or that they get picked up, or that they get dropped off, doesn't mean that they're actually going to school and going to class. We had a number of times where kids would actually walk in the front of the school and walk straight on out to the back of the school and walk off the school property. Sometimes at certain ages, having their friends pick them up in a car, and they go off and they hang out all day and engage in all kinds of behavior, much of which the parents would be appalled to find out about.
And then they drop them off when it's time to get back on the bus or to go back home, right? So the parents are clueless.
Exactly. And which brings me to another point, that our Department of Juvenile Justice nationally has stated that the time of day for most juvenile delinquency / crimes is usually the after school hours between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And the reason being is that typically those are the times when many kids are not supervised by parents or other adults. And so it's important that parents have a system in place to monitor the conduct of their children, particularly when they get into the teenage years, because these kids can get into all kinds of things, and parents may not even have a clue as to what's going on, because the kids can put on the kind of picture, cut on the kind of face that they think that their parents want to see.
The one that they learned when they were an infant.
Exactly.
On up, right?
Exactly. It starts young.
Yes, it does. It does. And, I found it interesting as I read your book too, and with the cases you've had before you, where the parents are just in such denial, some of them naively so, but some others, I'm sure they got to have at least some hint that, it's not everybody else and not their child. But they will stand before you and still say, oh no, my baby didn't do that, I know my baby wouldn't do that, or whatever else. And they will just defend that, even to the point of, if their child, I'm sure, gets into the adult system, then they're going to sell and mortgage everything they've got to defend them, when all along all that kid had to do was say, Mom, I did it, I did it.
And that's the unfortunate part, but I can't tell you how many parents of cases I presided over where the parents were completely in denial. And just like you laid it out there, the kids keep getting involved into burglaries and robberies and things that just kind of led from one level to another. And many times the only end result was, I could think of a set of parents, several that come to mind, who literally lost their marriage. They not only lost their marriage, but lost their company, lost everything they had, because they were truly trying to cover for their child. And yet this child was involved in all kinds of burglaries and auto thefts and things that just would blow the average layperson's mind to think that these kids were involved in this kind of conduct. But some of it was gang related. Some of these kids even decided that they created their own gang and engaged in these kinds of things. So parents really have to know their children. And if a child is doing something wrong, they need to acknowledge the fact. And let's get some help. Let's get some intervention. And I think that so often the judicial system gets blamed for the lack of, they say, well, it's the judge's fault because this is happening. But come on, folks, let's look in the mirror. Let's be real. This didn't happen because that person showed up in front of the judge. It started happening a long time before that. And if we began to start looking at these issues, even within our own homes, and beginning to correct that conduct early on, we can avoid some of the consequences that end up causing our children to go to jail. And if you want to think about it from the taxpayer's point of view, causing the expenditure of large sums of tax dollars. Couldn't those tax dollars be better used in education? Couldn't they be better used in order to help address some of the positive things that we should be doing? But I really believe that the partnership to help keep our kids on track starts in the home with the parents, working with the school system as kids then begin to move in that direction, and then ultimately working in the community, helping us to kind of forge together a multitask response.
And so that we don't not speak about this, because both of us understand the fact that there is a strong need, and whether or not the parents want to do this or not, but there's a strong need and a help in building your foundation on a spiritual foundation.
Absolutely.
You had it in your home life and your upbringing. I had it in mine. And I'm sure that really and truly probably the young people that we hung around would say about us, their parents, they don't play.
That's
I mean,
right.
they may have thought you might, but their parents don't play. And they'd also say, that's somebody that's going to be somebody one day.
And many of those same, just we talked about birds of a feather, many of us hung with other kids who actually were under the control of their parents in the same way. They were going to church.
That's who your parents allowed you to hang
You had no
with,
choice. That's it. All of us were in the same boat, so to speak. And when you think about the fact that I've had parents tell me, and I might ask the question sometimes just to get a better feel for the child. Because I remember some of the DJJ reports they used to bring to me, they would say, child does not attend church nor is involved in any type of structured community activity. And so part of my response would be, what can we do to get this child involved in something positive? What can we do to change this child's associations? And yes, singing in the church is a good way of doing so. I've had parents say, well, I can't make my child go to church. And I have to pause and say, excuse me, why can't you? Do you provide the roof over their head? Do you provide the food on their table? Do you provide the clothes on their back? Yeah. And in fact, I've even heard them say, well, I can't go in my child's room because that's my child's room. That's their privacy area. Excuse me? You're doing all these things for your child. And yet you also grew up, many parents grew up under the same set of rules I'm talking about now. Basic common sense rules and values. But yet they want to try now say, well, even though I was told to go to church and I went to church growing up, I'm not going to make my child go to church. I ask you the question, if it was good enough for you, why would you deny your child that same option?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because the church is, without deciding which church you go to, but go somewhere, learn something, learn values. And quite honestly, no matter what faith you may be a part of, they are teaching some kind of value.
Absolutely.
The importance of human relationship with God, the importance of having an understanding of how to get along with other people, and even down to the importance of how to love yourself. Those are important values that no matter what label you attach to it, no matter what denomination you attach to it, no matter what faith you attach to it, those are the kind of things that have created a society that still remains intact today, in spite of the challenges that we still have.
Absolutely. And, as we're talking about it in terms of the value and the importance that that parent and that parental role model plays in the life of a child. And there are instances where you talk about the parent who has that child as the man of the house, and they take the position of that missing spouse and all of that kind of stuff. What goes on all that? Jeez, I mean.
Well, and there are extremes with this too, with this whole phrase. But oftentimes, when the man of the house, let's say, when the man leaves, or maybe it was a single parent from the beginning, and there was not a male figure there. I strongly encourage parents that you need to find some type of male influence, because and not to criticize mothers who have had that responsibility of raising boys, but it still gives a boy can still needs the influence of a man, and whether that man is within the house as the father, or whether it is a father figure such as maybe the uncle, maybe a neighbor, maybe a church, a fellow member of the church, maybe it's somebody in the community, maybe it's the football coach, the basketball coach, the teacher, the principal. I mean, the parents need to not be ashamed to reach out to other people in the community and to get the kind of mentoring, because every now and then a young boy is going to need somebody to kind of grab them and remind them of what their parameters are, what their limits are. Because on the other hand, I've seen it where those young boys who have been told that they're the young man of the house, they grow up to and after a certain point in time being told that, they begin to believe that. And next thing you know, they want to start controlling the mother and start telling the mother what she can do and what she can't do. I've even seen it where they engage in domestic violence towards their mother and tell them, you can't tell me what to do. I'm the man of the house. And then, unfortunately, there are issues where those young boys, if they're left unchecked, many of them sometimes get involved in street behavior and might actually be street hustling, might actually be bringing money back into the house, might actually be giving mama some money. And when that happens, the whole dynamics change. So no longer do we have a parent-child relationship, but now we got a child who thinks he's on the same par with that parent. And then can dictate to the parent that if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to engage in violence, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to cut off the money I'm bringing to you. And it's changed the whole dynamics. And God created parents and children
Right.
He didn't create us to be the friends of our kids when we're trying to raise them through the formative years. There's a time to become a friend with your parent. But I say to you that that's when that child grows up to the point and is mature enough, whether that's at 18, 19, 20, it might even be at 40. But when that child gets mature enough to have that type of relationship. But in the formative years, that's why God created parents and children. He didn't create those children to be the friends of their parents. Because when you become a friend, okay, you tell your friend everything, okay? And sometimes parents tell them too much, you know, or they let them see too much.
Right.
You know, they let them engage or stand around and hear adult conversations that children should not be exposed to. And I think that because of that, and because we seem to believe that there are certain things that, oh, well, I got my kids got freedom, and I need to make sure that they can listen to my conversation. No, if it's an adult conversation, cut it off. Your parents didn't let you listen to adult conversations.
Or take part in it.
No, we'll send your butt to your room in a minute or give you that eye, and you knew what that eye meant.
That's right. And then we gotta talk about those parents that you say who try to buy the love of their kids. I mean,
it's almost the reversal of being the friend, but it's also the same lead. Parents who feel that, you know, they gotta buy their child. You know, they gotta buy that friendship. They gotta buy that relationship. And it starts off with buying things like buying toys, okay, and not creating boundaries, not creating limits. And it continues on. And it continues. I've actually recall a couple cases where unfortunately the father of the home had been incarcerated, and mom and daughter ended up becoming quote unquote like sisters. And except that at a certain point in time, as that child got into the teenage years, now that child began to start wanting to tell mom what to do. And even though mom had felt like she could just go and buy, you know, we go to the mall on the weekends, we get our nails done together. At 11, 12 years old, we go to Victoria's Secrets and shop together. And you know, and I show my daughter what I'm buying, and my daughter shows me what she's gonna get or what she wants me to buy for her. And then we become like sister friends. But then when the situation gets to the point where now that young child who's 14, 15 years old wants to rebel and say, well, mama, I don't want to do what you want me to do, or they start treating you like they are friends, and as opposed to parent-child. Now the situation gets out of control. And we've seen kids end up getting in fights with parents, and then law enforcement gets involved. So it all started because the roles were all messed up. Because parents seem to think that I want my child to be my friend, I want that child to love me, to like me. It's innate that children are going to love their parents. It's innate that parents are going to love their children. But at the same time, we have to get to the point of understanding that those relationships and roles need to be established as parent-child, as opposed to these quote-unquote, I got to buy my child's love. No, that love will be there. Will there be times when your children don't like what you tell them to do? Absolutely. Okay, but that's what a role of a parent is.
right.
A parent has to set parameters, has to develop discipline, create discipline and limits for that child. And there'll come a point in time, even if they're mad at you, you know, and some parents let them slam the door and go to their room, or for that matter, you tell the parent, you can't come in my room because this is my room. And like I said, as I said earlier, if you're paying putting the roof over their head, food on the table, clothes on their back, then you have the authority, the innate authority to govern their conduct in your home. So I don't believe in that stuff about this is my room, this is my drawer. I recall a phrase one of my pastor used one time, said, not only did I buy the dresser drawers, but I bought the drawers that are in those drawers. Okay, and so therefore I'm responsible, and actually God's going to hold me accountable if I don't do what's right towards raising my children and bringing them up in the fear of God.
Now, you mentioned that you ruled over, what, 100,000 cases or so, and I'm sure over all of that time, and you said, what is it, about 20 years, a little over 20 years that you've been?
Actually, 25.
25, that's right. You mentioned that to begin with, 25. I'm trying to put that out of my mind here, but I'm just 25. Oh, wow.
You haven't aged at all.
Oh, thank you. But you know, in all of those years then, because I think in one of the chapters you mentioned about even drug court. And talk a little bit about the individuals who find themselves where, there is really a form of abuse because they're taking alcohol, they're taking drugs, they're taking even prescription drugs and the like. And some of their parents even, telling them to kind of sell some of that stuff or share it or whatever else. And we have really a great drug court in our county. I mean, it's been very, very successful. What is it that seems to draw these young people? I'm sure it's probably the same thing as with drugs, but draw them to that type of a scenario. And then what is it that you've been able to do that's a success in really trying to get them to kind of back away from it?
Well, I think it boils down to accountability.
Mm-hmm.
We have several different layers of drug court. We've had the juvenile drug court, which I presided over. We had family drug court, which dealt with the parents who had been abused, neglected, or abandoned their children, and were on a case plan to try to get their kids back, and their real primary problem was drugs, drugs and alcohol. And so the big part there is accountability. They used to regularly appear in front of me on a weekly basis, and there were certain things they had to do. One of which was to continue to do their drug tests to make sure that they were not using again, and at the same time getting the kind of counseling and the kind of treatment so that they didn't slip back into this particular style. Well, yes, we've had instances where we've actually had parents and children both involved with drug use at the same time, illicit drug use. I recall one instance where one of my bailiffs came back in and told me that they had overheard a conversation in the hallway where a parent was literally cursing at a child, a teenager, for not sharing their drugs with the parent. And it's like, what? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's so far out there that nobody really would believe that happens, but it does. And unfortunately, what has occurred now is that there are always these ebbs and flows in terms of the types of drugs that are in vogue, so to speak. And so even right now, we've seen sort of a downturn, so to speak, in like the marijuana usage and the cocaine usage, but there's been such an uptick in prescription drugs and prescription drug abuse. People can die from that. And we've seen people actually die from overdoses dealing with prescription medication because it wasn't properly being taken. And of course, people, it's an addiction. And yet, people can overcome the addiction. We've seen multiple success stories. One of the statistics that I was most proud of during my last year of family drug court was that we were successful in helping 11 babies be born drug-free because their mothers were actually in drug court. We were holding them accountable. They were being tested regularly. And they had certain things that they had to do in order to get out and to be reunited. And those that were pregnant actually delivered drug-free babies. And so while that won't show up in the major stats anywhere, for me, it was a victory because that's 11 kids who we won't have to put tons of money into their ongoing treatment throughout the course of their lives. Because on the other hand, we saw some kids who were born, some with misshapen heads, some with all kinds of other, what I like to refer to as the alphabet issues, ADD, ADHD, and a host of other things, ODD, oppositional defiance, attention deficit disorder, and a whole host of other things that have occurred because of some of which was a result of parental drug use while the parents were pregnant. Fetal alcohol syndrome. All of those things were the results of parents not being cautious of what they were doing, putting into their bodies while they were carrying a child. And so, yes, have we been successful? And of course, now the big deal is, of course, we have the felony drug court, and we have Judge Will that presides over that countywide, doing a great job with that, helping to turn people around, holding them accountable. At the same time, it becomes a good thing from a cost-benefit analysis because it costs a lot less to deal with drug court than it does to incarcerate people, just routinely put them in jail. The only thing they do when they get out, they can't wait to go and do some more drugs. So, we have to do some things differently in order to see some different results.
And I noticed too, and just so our listening audience and whoever goes to watch this on YouTube will know, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg in terms of a lot of the great information that's in this book about how to keep your child from going to jail, which is written by the Honorable Hubert L. Grimes. But there is a chapter you have here where you actually have the young people, you have them do a certain kind of a plan. and they plan out and write out, and they're forced to think about their future. You know, and I think for a lot of young people, there are a lot of young people today who don't even see themselves having a future. They don't see themselves living beyond 18.
Yeah.
Hard as that may be for our listeners to hear, but there are a lot of people who see themselves that way. And, you know, to force them to think out of that box that they put themselves into about a future and how do you see yourself in different situations is really awesome. How does that work, number one, and how has it worked in terms of working with the young people? And before you start, so that I don't have to stop you, you're listening to Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards. My guest is Circuit Judge Hubert L. Grimes. And we're talking about, you know, we're talking about good stuff that will help your young people. And in particular, his book, How to Keep Your Child from Going to Jail. And this is WLE, 1380 AM on your radio dial in Ormond Beach, Florida. It's also Goliath Radio and Big, 1380. We're happy to have you with us. And we hope and we know, of course, that this is and will help you and your young people, whether you're a single parent, you know, both parents, grandparent, substitute parent, whatever, you need to get this book, number one, but give a listen because everything that we're sharing is something that you need to do to make sure that this current generation, which is also our future generation, has a future, right?
Absolutely. In fact, keep in mind, this current generation we're talking about of young people will be the ones paying our Social Security. Okay? So we want them to be very successful.
We want them healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Exactly.
Now, what is the plan that you put them on?
Well, I called it a personal success plan. We developed it while serving as a delinquency judge on the west side of the county. It basically tells young people they have to look at several different areas. One, the friends they associate with. What do they want to do what do they dream about? What would they like to aspire to become? And it's a detailed plan that they have to complete and literally write it out because it's good for not only for students, I mean the young people and the teenagers who are, say, caught up in court, but it's a good plan that I've used also with other students, like in the high schools when I spoke at some different assemblies. But also when I also teach at the law school, I've used it there to help young people say, okay, how do I frame myself to get to the next step in my life? So it's good for all of us, even as adults. Sometimes we need to kind of go back and revisit, see where we are now and where it is that we want to be in a few years from now. So all of that was designed again to be able to, what I like to refer to as therapeutic jurisprudence, helping us to figure out solutions to problems. And if we can do that without the idea that we're just going to lock folks up and then they serve their time, they're going to get out. And many people without any change in their mind are going to go back and do the same thing over and over and over again. So we try to make this book and all these various suggestions available to not say we figured that all out, but to say let's start the dialogue. Let's start the conversation. Let's be able to be proactive. And if we can get that conversation going, I truly believe that that's how we're going to help make a change in our society and in our local community. So if anyone wants to get a copy of the book, they can certainly do so. They can Google my name. They can go on Amazon. They can go on my website, which is hubertgrimes.com. And certainly we'd love to engage that conversation and continue to keep it going.
Wonderful. And give them that website again.
It's actually www.hubertgrimes.com.
And you also said that they can contact you by going to your email address as well and share with them what that is.
The email address, of course, is hughgrimes@gmail.com. Sometimes we get all of these different websites and internet start running together. But my contact information is Hugh Grimes, H-U-G-H Grimes @gmail.com. And again, you can Google the name and you'll see the information there, including the website, and they can go on from there.
And let me say too, because I asked you this early on, you're available, and I know I've heard you make presentations around and about because your overall goal really is to help young people. And if you would share with them, you have dedicated this book to, it was your nephew?
Yes, it was actually our nephew who got killed in Afghanistan, 37 years old. Was in the military from the time of high school, getting ready to retire back in 2007, but was killed in a roadside bomb. And so as a part of trying to keep his life alive, we dedicated that. And then we also involved in a couple other activities. My wife and I through the Near Empowerment Group. We've been successful in sending about 750 kids total to camp.
Awesome.
And that's been since 2008. In fact, we just sent a group of 87 kids to camp from the Daytona-Volusia area the last week of June. And that was successful. We worked in concert with the Florida Elks Camp over in Umatilla. And the kids have had a great time. Kids are age 9 to 13. We'll be doing some additional workshops and other kind of mentoring activities with those youngsters, partnering with other groups in the community to help make that come about, including Bethune-Cookman, and just trying our best to try to make an impact upon our young people, because that's where my passion lies.
And your wife's as well, and tell her I'm still trying to get her on the show. She's so busy, like you, she is busy, and out there just doing so many great things for the community and in the community, and God bless you guys in all that you do. Now, in the last few minutes, hopefully you'll feel comfortable doing this, because you and I were talking earlier about, you know, the president's comments about the Trayvon Martin incident, and how he has experienced some of the things that a lot of African Americans have said they have experienced. And I think it's just key, Hubert, and important to, in conjunction with what the president has said, because there are people who say, oh, he's just doing this for politics, you know, nobody's following him, nobody's doing this, nobody's doing that. But you're a judge, and you've shared that you've experienced some of these things where, you know, you go into a store and people start to act a little bit different and follow you. I've experienced it. It's something that African Americans, I don't care what your level or stage in life or station in life, that we experience. And it has to be, no matter what anybody else says, it has to be based on the color of our skin. Do you feel comfortable just sharing any of that so that people know that irrespective of where you are, there is that situation, but as the president said, there's still hope?
There's always hope. Yeah, I've experienced numerous times which situations, but I've never tried to let it hold me back. We always work to overcome it. But one example comes to mind. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, but I think this is a good time. Back in 1994, I was serving as a county judge here. And for those of you that were here during that time, remember Black College Reunion. And I was working as a volunteer. This was the year, 1994. I had gone over to from the Ocean Center on my way back to pick up some additional supplies from our location there to take them back. I'd come across the Main Street Bridge. There was a FHP officer there. So I told him who I was, showed him my ID, and said, hey, I need to go over from the beach side to the mainland to pick up some supplies. He said, okay, no problem. He gave me his card, signed it, and said, hey, if I'm not here when you get back, just give my card. So I thanked him, we were kind to each other, went on picking things up. Here I am as a volunteer in the community. I go pick the items up.
I think Mission United, right?
Well, it was right after Mission United.
Right after,
yes,
okay,
yes.
All right. That's right, you had the group with the, I'm with you, all right.
So, in fact, I actually had served as a chairman of the event the year before at the request of the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
So I would go and pick the things up, and as luck would have it, when I came back, this particular officer was gone. There was another one there. He told me he was trying to direct the traffic, everything down to the Orange Avenue Bridge. So I tried to stop him and show him, showed him my credentials, and he said, I don't care who you are. So then as I turned, I went and parked my car, got out, walked over, told him who I was, introduced myself to him, showed him the card from the previous sergeant that was there, and he told me he used some expletives in telling me that if I didn't get my so-and-so back in the car, he would take my black so-and-so out to 92 and personally arrest me himself. Now, I'm telling you, this was really crazy. I had my wife in the car and the kids in the car. It was crazy. So I decided, so wait a minute, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I pulled over to another location and called up the law enforcement that we've been working with, and told them I was having trouble getting across the bridge. If I had gone the direction he wanted me to go in with the rest of the traffic, it would have taken me 2 hours. And all I was trying to do as a volunteer was take these items, it was some T-shirts and other things over to the Welcome Center.
Right.
So I actually called up the law enforcement. They showed up on the scene. But while we were waiting for law enforcement to show up, one of the Daytona Beach police officers who had appeared in front of me regularly in court drove by in his private vehicle. Needless to say, he was a Caucasian officer, and I stopped him. And I said, Officer so-and-so, I said, would you let this out-of-town officer know who I am, that I'm working with this event, and I need to get these items across the bridge? He said, okay, I'll be glad to tell him. He pulls up to the bridge in his private car, And he tells the officer, hey, that's one of our local judges. He's working as a volunteer to take these items across to the Ocean Center, Welcome Center. The guy told him, and I heard it with my own ears, you can go across that bridge, but he's not going across that bridge today. And so immediately, so what's the difference? It was nothing but skin color. So a few minutes later, fortunately, one of the Daytona Beach traffic officers came up and said, oh, Judge, we hear you're having a little trouble. We're going to work this out, no problem. And literally, they escorted me with 2 motorcycle officers across the bridge, our own Main Street bridge where we live at. And they took me over so that I could take this over there. The FHP guy stood there with almost like he was so angry and bitter that he had been thwarted in his efforts to stop me from going across the bridge. And it was like, wait a minute, I can't believe this. In my own town, in my own community where I'm serving, but that happened. And eventually after it was all over with, a week or so later, I wrote a letter to the FHP director in Tallahassee and advised him of such. And they said they took care of it. They took some sanctions against the guy. I didn't make it into a public spectacle. If I had resisted that guy that particular day, which is also what I tell kids, you can't win a battle out on the street like that. Go into court because it's a level playing field. You get a chance to speak your side of the story to a dispassionate and impartial third party. But if I had rejected and had done like so many young people maybe, been quick to mouth off at the officer right then and there, no doubt, he would have arrested me. It would have made all kind of headlines. And then, people would have said, well, he must have done something wrong because he got arrested. And it had nothing to do with me doing something wrong. In fact, I was trying to do something right.
Right.
That's an example of what the president is talking about. And we do need to engage this dialogue and not be afraid of the fact that, yes, there's still these issues in 2013 going on in our community and in our society. And that doesn't make everybody bad, but it's just a reality that there are still people out here who they look at us differently. And they see nothing but skin. They don't get a chance to see your heart. They don't get a chance to see what kind of person that you might be. And yet, there are folks who are saying, oh, you guys are just playing a race card. It's the reality. And I think, having been on the bench for the time that I have, people know me. They know that I try to be fair. I don't try to treat everybody that comes to court the same. But I really work diligently to make sure everybody comes to court gets treated fairly. And that's the difference, that they get it treated fairly so that when they come to court, they know they've had an opportunity to be heard, and that we've tried our best to apply the law in the appropriate fashion, and that people leave with a result knowing that they have been heard. And also, we ask for in the same sense, being treated fairly. Not necessarily always the same, because people are not the same. They're different people in this world. You got some people that may have different, like for example, they may be handicapped, as we might use. I don't know I know I'm not using the politically correct term.
Right. They're changing it.
It's changed. But I mean, they're different, and people that may have a different skin color, different language, a different culture, different education. But it doesn't mean we treat everybody quote unquote the same. But let's work diligently to treat everybody fairly. Make sure people are treated fairly. And I think that's the whole issue that has come about because of this whole matter. And I do hope we can continue that dialogue.
Oh, absolutely. Because the bottom line is that we should not make a decision just based upon that person's color, the color of their skin.
We've all had experiences where we find, as they say, you can't judge a book by the cover. Okay, we find out that the person, after we open that cover, is sometimes a lot different than what they might appear on the outside.
Absolutely. And when the president says he's been followed in a store and he's been this and he's been that, that happens to me. I know you've shared it happens to you.
Yes.
And till today it happens, and it's something that we as people of color, to put us all, we as people of color experience almost every day.
Yeah.
My husband and I went to the theater in Port Orange, I shared with you, and he was a little behind me because he locked the car, and then he was coming behind to go to the movies. And as we were approaching the movie theater, I was looking back because I was looking for him to come on. And a white man and a white woman who were just leaving the theater, the guy grabbed his wife and held on to her tightly as they walked by him. Now, anybody who knows my husband, the pastor, this, that, and the other. I mean, that last thing on his mind, he could care less. He didn't even notice it, but I did, as he pulled her to himself, and and they were like grasping her purse and stuff too as they walked by. I mean, that is crazy, people.
Yeah, we see so much of it, and I've personally experienced the one I just told you about. Like I said, I've never shared that publicly before. But I can tell you that I've had numerous experiences personally, even on the bench, even being on the bench itself. But do we let it stop us? No.
Right, absolutely.
But we do acknowledge it. We're sensitive
Because
to it.
you live in reality. You have to live in reality.
Yeah.
You know, but I was saying to someone, one of the greatest things, in my opinion, that has come about through the Trayvon Martin case, Zimmerman case, is that the parents now have a foundation and they're going to work with young people to help prepare them and to help them to get a college education and the like. That is a super thing, a positive thing that's happening. People talk about people getting registered, people voting and the like. That too would be a very positive thing. But you know, the most positive thing we can do is to use this to promote us, to encourage us, to help us to progress, do better, want more, and want better for ourselves, for our children, and to do what is necessary to ensure that we are even better educated, even better prepared. You know, that we get lawyers, you know, who can go into the courtrooms, judges who can be in the courtroom, people who are able to then say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, so that all of us, fairness is the key. We're not talking about having more or being more or seeing ourselves as better. We're talking about the fact that we're equal, that we be treated equally and fairly. So people, I've read articles in the paper where people say, why is this thing still going on? I'm tired of this discussion, Well, the discussion isn't totally about the Trayvon Martin Zimmerman case. The discussion is about the unfairness, probably tied to that case, but even more so, that racial unfairness, that color line, you know, that we're all having to deal with day in and day out. And I hope that people who are not of color will not take this as a put down to them, because there are a lot of great people who are not people of color who are out there who are fighting the same battles. And there are people who are fighting those battles for us, and for that we say thank you. But the battle is still raging and raging because there's still inequity out there, and we have to, like you said, we got to have that discussion.
There's no doubt about that. And I mean, when you really think about it, most of our families, in some way, we are interconnected, we are interracial. I know in my own family, there's a whole wing of my family that is Puerto Rican. Okay, at the same time, there's a group on my wife's side of the family. My wife's grandfather is white. There's another side of my family who is married to, I have a nephew married to an Asian woman. So how can I hate anybody? You know, and then yet, if I'm also a Christian, how can I proclaim hate towards another when I'm supposed to be about love?
Right, absolutely.
And Jesus said the two greatest laws was love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, these are the kind of things that we do need to talk about, because so often we miss that mark. And if we're going to truly help to make this society a better society, so that our children can walk in the walk. So not only do we have to keep them out of jail, but that we can teach them the positive values of what it's about in loving one another and learning how to get along with one another, learning how to do the right things. You know, I have a son who's living overseas right now, and he has been for the last several years. And one of the things he tells me, he said, Daddy, you know, when you're overseas, they don't care about the fact that whether you're white American or black American. They look at all of us as Americans. And the sad part about it is, so oftentimes Americans we don't come off as kind people. We come off as arrogant. We come off as you know, believing that we're bigger and better than everybody else in the world. And he says, as a result of that, sometimes we get cut off from things that could bless us, from things that could help us, because people see us all as Americans. He said, but when they learn that, you know, I can get along with them, I can talk with them, I'm humble in my dealings with them, and yet at the same time, I'm proud of my culture, I'm proud of who I am. He said, you'd be amazed at how many doors get open. And he's been blessed to travel in over 29 countries, far more than his daddy has ever done. And when I think about that, that's the next generation. That's the world that we're living in, is recognizing that we're not part just here in Daytona Beach or Volusia County or the state of Florida, but we're part of the world. And how are we going to deal with other people around the world if we can't figure out how to deal with each other?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I agree with our president when he says that our better time is coming actually through the young people. Yeah, because many of them don't see what we see, and it's a shame if that same prejudice, that same veil of prejudice is passed on to them, whether it be to people of color or not people of color. If we pass on those prejudices and stereotypes, etc., to the young people who want to be better and know better and want to get to know those around them and have those good relationships, those positive relationships, that would be the shame of it all if that happened, as opposed to us trying to get along together, we who are of a certain age group, and then allow those young people to do their thing, because they really want to get along.
Oh yeah, and I think that's the conversation. That's the conversation we must have, and not be afraid to have it. And I think that's one of the big struggles that we've had so often, is that people are afraid to talk about it. They feel like, oh, if I say something, then somebody's going to label me as a racist, or they're going to say, oh, well, you're playing the race card. So you got these two dynamics on one extreme, on both ends of the spectrum. But the reality is that we need to be talking about how do we build a bridge that crosses cultural barriers, that crosses the race lines. How do we learn how to cross the bridge, to bridge each other, at the same time being proud of the fact of who we are as a people. I'm a descendant of people who survived slavery. And I think about that just in and of itself, to just think about that they came through what they came through. And here I am, just a few generations out of slavery, and been blessed to be in a position that I'm in. How do we stand, be proud of that ancestry on the one hand, and at the same time building bridges on the other? That's, I believe, why we have to have this discussion.
Absolutely, and I just came back from family reunion, the fourth family reunion, and it was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but the family's really from Walterboro. And that was the theme of, believe it or not, that was the theme of our family reunion, building bridges, from the past to the future. And we have a great foundation actually to build upon, even with everything that went on. We come from a strong and powerful in terms of what they stood up to and are still standing today in our past. And we have to pass that kind of feeling, that kind of strength on to our young people as well. And I would say to all young people, and with what they're faced with now, with what they deal with, we keep them in prayer. We keep our families in prayer. And well, we have to call it to a close, but I just want to say to you, Judge, our circuit judge, Judge Hubert Grimes, you are doing a fantastic job. As a guardian ad litem volunteer, I'm inactive now, but I was, and I always heard, oh, let's keep him, because he is so great with these young people, and he's doing such a fantastic job. And you have done that. You have done that, and you and your wife, Daisy, continue to do just an outstanding job in working with young people, working with families. And again, time is the greatest gift that you can give, and you guys are doing that. And you're doing it in your book, How to Keep Your Child from Going to Jail. I'm going to ask you last time to give that email address and give that website for people who would like to get the book. And I encourage everyone, I don't care your race or whatever, this works no matter what, no matter your circumstance, this works. These are tried and true commonsensical ideas that you need to put to work in your household. And whether you have children or not, you have impact on other children. Get the book, How to Keep Your Child from Going to Jail. And what are those? What's the website and your email address?
The website again is hubertgrimes.com, my name. Or if you, for some reason you don't have a pen to write it down, if you remember my name, you can Google the name. It'll come up under the listing of Google. And then, of course, if you want to converse with me on this conversation that we're just talking about, then certainly you can do so by reaching me at H-U-G-H, Grimes, G-R-I-M-E-S, at gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Judge Grimes, for coming on, Hubert. It's been a great conversation. It's a great book. I'm loving it. I told you I'm going to purchase two. I'm going to send one to both of my sons. They don't have kids yet, but it's a primer for before you get to that point. And if you're already there, it's great too, instruction for you how to deal with and work best with your children. Okay, guys, until next time, be informed, be empowered, stand tall for that which is right and truthful. Until next time, this is Truth with Gwen Azama-Edwards. My guest, Circuit Judge Hubert L. Grimes. Again, the book, How to Keep Your Child from Going to Jail. Hey guys, be blessed and have a great week. And remember, keep standing for that which is right and truthful. God bless and have a great week. And thank you again, Judge Grimes. God bless. All right, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, sir.